Welcome back to our guest docket, where Mike and I will be interviewing our guest, Phil Heimlich. Phil, do me a favor. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your family life, your hobbies.
I grew up in New York. My father moved here in 1969 when he became the director of surgery at the Jewish Hospital when it was out on Burnett Avenue. Never went to school in Cincinnati. I served a 3-year sentence at a boys' boarding school in Connecticut. Went to Stanford University for my undergraduate, University of Virginia Law School. I was a prosecutor for 9.5 years, then I got into politics. Hobbies, you being a college football referee will appreciate this, Darryl. I love to watch college football, like to watch college basketball, like to watch my kids play sports. That's enough to take up my time.
That's wonderful.
Tell us a little bit about what caused your interest in practicing law and then going from law into public service.
I always had a kind of interest, it sounds kind of trite, but in justice. I really did. I always had that kind of compassion for people who were victims of crime, and that's what really got me interested in being a prosecutor and in being in politics. And I always enjoyed my time in the prosecutor's office. I felt I helped a lot of people. There were some cases that I truly spent years of my time on the side investigating, where there was one builder who had ripped off about 30, 40 homeowners of everything they had, and he operated in different jurisdictions, so the cops couldn't never realize the scam, and I just investigated on my own for about 2 years, and I was able to eventually convict him and send him away for quite a long time. That kind of thing really drove my passion for victims of crime, and that led to my running for city council and for ultimately county commission. So they kind of tie together. It's sort of a desire to help people and I think right some wrongs, that kind of thing.
Do you think that your criminal background, being in the prosecutor's office, your legal background helped you when you were on city council and with the Hamilton County Commissioner's office?
Yeah, it definitely helped being a prosecutor because I had a certain level of respect when it came to criminal justice issues that the others didn't have, because I understood the criminal justice system. Like the Cincinnati Enquirer, at least when it was a little more conservative, you remember when we had Pete Bronson and some other great, really good people on the editorial board, kind of had a rapport with me and always referred to me as a former prosecutor when they would do an editorial. I'm the one, by the way, you might remember, who introduced the teen curfew, which was very controversial when it was introduced, but became quite popular. I started the Citizens on Patrol program, which is now in 40, 50 neighborhoods in the city. And I also passed restrictions which keep sexually oriented businesses out of the city. You'll notice that we don't have porn shops like they do in a lot of other cities. All that is what I accomplished on city council, and having that background in the justice system I think gave me some credibility to get those things done.
Well, I think, I started as a prosecutor and Darryl worked in the court system, and unless you are actually involved in the court system to some extent, you just cannot understand the incredible volume of crime that comes through there and how difficult a job the police officers have.
Yeah. Absolutely, no question.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's go back to the Ferguson discussion we were having a little bit earlier. What do you think Ferguson has done right in handling this? What do you think Ferguson has done wrong from the community, from the township aspect?
Well, one of the things you hear a lot, it's always the same theme whenever these kind of incidents occur is, they should have gotten the report out. They delayed it too long. We had that here in the Timothy Thomas thing, they're having it here. But see, there's two sides to this, okay? The protesters, the people that are kind of the anti-police, they always criticize them. They should have gotten the information out quicker. Shouldn't have gotten, calm the community. Well, the problem is you're talking about a criminal investigation of the officer who did the shooting. And as you know, Mike, as a former prosecutor, you compromise an investigation when you make the facts public too soon. It's if you really want them to do an effective investigation, you cannot expect them to release the information right away. This is one of the misnomers about all this. And you cannot effectively investigate what happened if you have to do a press conference every hour on the hour. It's that simple. And as far as what they did right and wrong, it's a little hard to say, because as you know, what happened was, as soon as the thing started moving forward, it became a big public issue. The governor came along and basically yanked it away from him, sent in the National Guard and this and that. And you got Holder, the Attorney General, who's coming in, frankly, I think for political reasons, he's got to do his investigation of the police department there, which to me seems like a little phony. So it's hard to fault them one way or the other, because frankly, the thing was pulled out from under them. You don't know what kind of job they do. They want the prosecutor, I guess, in St. Louis supposed to resign, I guess for whatever reason. He's been there for a while. You know, there's so much outside pressure, it's really hard to evaluate what kind of job the local people have done.
Well, hasn't the governor's intervention in that Ferguson, Missouri situation kind of undermined the authority of the prosecutor in that situation?
Oh, there's no question about it. There's no question. They have basically undermined, yes. And you see, the thing is, it's always easy for Senator McCaskill or any of these politicians who are usually on the Democrat side, but to attack the local authorities like it's their fault and to point fingers at them. And as you pointed out, Darrell, yeah, that's basically what's happening. The rug's been pulled out from under them. They don't have the ability to do their job because they're being told, you're too biased, you can't do it.
Well, you said something earlier about, you know, trying to do press releases and press conferences to, you know, kind of placate the public with regard to information. I think that there was recently a shooting up in Dayton at a store where a gentleman was walking around with, I guess it was a BB gun or some type of a pellet gun, and everyone is now complaining that they have not released the videotape of that, and I believe that our Ohio Attorney General is saying, no, we're not going to release it until our investigation is done.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. One of the things that you do in an investigation is you try to interview witnesses, and you try actually to, if you can, to interview even the suspect if once you've given the Miranda rights, if they want to talk. You don't have a chance of getting facts from witnesses or from the person who's the accused. You don't have a chance of that if this thing's on the news all the time or if you start releasing video. Because that video is likely to tell people, oh, don't talk. Or they can be biased in their answers by what they saw or heard on the video. No question it compromised the investigation.
I think the media has changed so much with the proliferation of the internet, and there is so much media out there with so much time to fill, and they create that 24-hour media cycle where just a story just gets covered and covered and covered, and it creates many claims of problems with investigations, and you know, there's always some expert that's commenting on it saying that, you know, you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is if you want to pick up the Cincinnati Enquirer just in the last 3 or 4 days, I just glanced at on my little app on my phone. It is amazing the number of people that have been shot in this city just in the last week or two. Okay, I've seen a couple instances where people have been shot, okay, whether it's by the police or just by each other or whatever, but often just street crime, right on the street. And yet, there's no attention paid to this. It's almost like business as usual. Why is that person's life, who was robbed on Vine Street or wherever and whose life has been taken away, why is that person's life less valuable than this guy Michael Brown? Not that his life isn't important. Why is one more valuable than the other? I don't see it that it is.
You know, I think that no matter what the outcome is of the investigations, you know, there obviously is some underlying frustration, tension in between the communities and the police. In your experience, you know, how do you improve a relationship between the community and the police?
Well, you know, I think that who you hire as police officers, I think, is important. I think evaluating the quality of the men and women you put on the force is critical. You don't want people, you know, I have a close friend who former police officer who actually teaches self-defense, and one of the things he said to me is when he was on the force, he was surprised at how many cops kind of see this as a way to get back at bullies or get back at whomever, and that's the kind of psychological testing you need to do. I think you have to be very careful in doing, and make sure the people you put on the street there are psychologically sound, have an understanding of what the laws are, what justice is all about, because that's how I think you prevent discrimination, that's how you prevent brutality and things like that. But, you know, I'm not one in favor of bringing in these high-priced consultants like the city of Cincinnati did. They spent millions of dollars on consultants and commissions, and basically what it is, it's a lot of lawyers and a lot of consultants that got their hand out, okay, and millions of dollars were spent. I actually think people that live in the rough areas of town, the lower income areas, they want tough law enforcement. They want fair law enforcement, but they don't want to have to worry about bolting their doors. They don't want to be worried if their kids walk out in their street, they're never going to come home. They want tough law enforcement too.
So it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, but with regard to police officers, the men and women that are out on the streets that are enforcing the laws, they need to be empathetic with the public. not sympathetic, but empathetic, understand their plights, understand their economic problems, their family problems, their addiction problems. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with it. One of the, by the way, an issue that relates to that is there's a big criticism of Ferguson's police department because the proportion of African American officers is much lower than in the population as a whole, and there's that implication, oh, they're discriminating. Well, I haven't looked into it, but I will almost guarantee you that the way police officers likely become officers down there the same way they do here, it's a strictly objective test. Okay? You can't discriminate. Everybody takes the same test. Now, the problem with that, though, is that you can't always take into account the factors you're talking about, Darrell. I think anybody who becomes a police officer has to have a very intensive interview and, frankly, psychological analysis, background, whatever, to make sure that they're not just smart enough and not physically equipped enough, but also that they have the right psychological makeup to have that kind of empathy for the people they're policing.
Do you think that City of Cincinnati Police Department has been able to take the 2001 riots and make any changes or improvements that were needed?
Yeah, I think they have, and I think they've implemented some reforms that I think are pretty decent. You know, but I also think that sometimes there's a balance there. I think if the cops think that they're always going to be targeted and somebody's always looking over their shoulder, I think they also have a tendency sometimes to back off, okay, and not really do the tough work that needs to be done. So I think we have to have some understanding about what, as you said, what these police officers go through, and not give them the impression that if you have to use force, that you're the one that's going to suffer the punishment, and that we're going to automatically assume you were wrong. I think we got to get rid of that attitude.
You know, I've noticed a lot of forces have gone to the body cams. And, you know, they have the video that's shooting out there so you can see what the police officer is seeing at that moment. And, you know, in my experience as a prosecutor, you know, they have a very difficult job. You know, when that Thomas individual came around that corner in a dark alley, I would not have wanted to be that police officer. What do you think about, you know, the body camera idea?
Oh, I think what you see with body cameras is usually they support the police. Usually they, not always, but usually they support what the officer did. So I think, sure, the more technology you can have like that, I think the better, no question.
Phil, thank you very much for coming. We're now going to move on to our resource docket where we discuss the legalities of protesting.